My name is Johan Rodenhuis, and thanks for having me today. And I'm going to tell you something about market engagement within our IWR2021 Workspace Hardware contracts. We had some big tenders in the period of 2021, early 2022. And my name is Johan Rodenhuis. I'm a sustainability advisor for the category ICT Workspace for the Dutch central government. And well, we work with we're a government-wide category, and we work for all ministries within the Netherlands. So that means we service all ministries. We do High Council of State, we do some advisory councils, and also the courts. So in total, I think 120 plus, 130 plus organizations. And within the Dutch government, we have 20-something categories which all focus on generic procurement. And our category focuses on all IT workspace for all offices and buildings and for employees of the Dutch government. So you can think about laptops, smartphones, or tablets, but also think about telecom solutions like voice over IP or SMS gateway. It's like two-factor SMS authentication to explain a little bit, but also the service numbers for bigger organizations. And our spend is approximately 163 million a year for that period of time. And we work in a smaller team of 8 persons, in which I'm the sustainability advisor. So I focus on everything from policy-related aspects to translating it all the way to our tenders and our contracts to make it work. And we're quite an ambitious category, I should say. One of our sustainability goals are based on procurement with impact, which is a government-wide strategy focusing on translating like the Dutch climate policy towards the business of the Dutch government itself. So non-primary processes actually. And we want to be one of the forerunners in the EU when it comes to sustainable IT and buying sustainable IT and pushing the markets. So that means that we have a little bit of a different setup than most categories within the Dutch government. We're one of the few who have a specific person or employee focusing on these kind of aspects to make sure we can meet the high ambitions. And we focus on also sharing knowledge and collaborating inside and outside the Dutch central government. And there's a reason for that, because we believe in accelerating and learning together, because that's a way to innovate as well. It's always good to look outside your own organization, to not only to the market, but also towards other organizations in Europe, for example, to see what are organizations developing and how we can use those kinds of developments for our own tenders. And we work also together in different pacts or international collaborations like buy groups or sort-like setups. And the goal with that is that we actively want to contribute to a green product and service catalog. So that means actually that if participants buy through our contracts, that they already know for sure that they meet, well, the highest or high standards of products, so that they know there are only green or greener or the greenest products available through our contracts. So it helps them to achieve their own goals within their business. But it also requires a lot from our category, of course. So what we want to do is to keep innovating, and every procurement cycle has to be better, and we have to learn fast to make sure we can live up to those expectations, but also to facilitate, of course, higher sustainability ambitions. And we do that pre-tender, during the tenders, and also post-tender. So pre-tender is an aspect we use from different networks, like buy less, and it focuses also on market collaboration, but also identifying needs. So with the data we, for example, get, we can advise or give recommendations to the business to state you can buy different products and innovate in this way, or get a high greener standard on a different way. And also during the tender process, we focus on buying different kind of products, facilitating all those aspects, and I will get to that in a minute. And post-tender in the contract management phase is more focused on use better and use longer, which also applies, of course, to the criteria and the award criteria and the criteria you put into place in the tendering phase. And if you want to keep innovating and to want to get better every cycle, we have to collaborate, of course, with rating and auditing organizations to, for example, know for sure which aspects on sustainability, like human rights, require more attention or are being monitored on site, for example, but also with rating and certifying organizations like TCO Certified, what we use a lot in our contracts. But we also have to create market engagement, of course, to make sure that we take along the market in our processes to figure out what is the best balance between being ambitious without getting over ambitious because of over demanding to the market. What we also do is take care of our participants. I just highlighted a little bit to make support them maximum from our category, because this knowledge is quite scarce. So not every participant has its own specific function for that or can figure out that on their own. So we use the power of collaboration, of course, within our contracts to help them get further. And what we mainly do, and I just heard it as well in the last presentation, is focusing on incremental and sustainable innovation. And disruptive innovation, like big changes, is not that common in markets. I think the last one was probably with the release of smartphones, probably is one of the biggest ones. Now we have, of course, some nice developments with the augmented reality, those aspects, or like working with drones, stuff like that. That's more a little bit disruptive. But we tend to focus more on incremental and sustainable innovation. And incremental innovation means that you take small steps to create multiple aspects of innovation within the contract without getting a big bang. But all those small steps, of course, contribute to a lot of innovation as well. And that's an approach we use in our contracts. And of course, they're all related to sustainable aspects, because that's the big change maker within our contracts. And incremental innovation contributes also in a way that it helps get the best practices, for example, from different markets, and applying them within our contracts with some slight changes to make them optimally suitable for IT. So we started up a whole process, which I'll get back to after this sheet. But what we also do is create an ambition web based on our sustainability ambitions. And that means that we try to make, in a graphical way, give insight to where are the best opportunities for our category to focus on regarding sustainability. And you can see in the left sheet, and it's in Dutch, unfortunately, but it means that we see the highest possible ambitions on, for example, 1, energy and climate, or 2, materials and natural resources and circular economy, and 3, environment, and also a little bit on CSR, so corporate social responsibility in the supply chain, but less on some social aspects, because we have a limited amount of services we use for the delivery of our products in our country, so it's less direct influence. So we have higher ambitions on those aspects. But we use this as a direction, as a strategy for our contracts to focus on gaining as much value for society, of course, as possible. And we do that with multiple market consultations, focusing on 50-50 price quality. That doesn't look much if you compare it, but if quality-wise things are quite close, then price is always makes some difference, but even if it's 50 or 30, it doesn't do that much within our category, at least. So we're probably going to push it towards 30% price and 30% quality. And about 87% of our award criteria was based on sustainability, based on all the market consultations we did before. So because we saw that was the one thing that set companies apart from each other in these kinds of generic markets with generic products, let's put it that way. And if I look into the project itself, it was a big project. It was 5 major tenders we publicized in 1 year, and we did preparations as well integral. So we had these 5 big tenders with an approximate value of 475 million euros, give or take, which all would be publicized in a certain phasing, so that there would be like a month separated between. So we can also learn from the first tender we publicized and use all the things we learned already for the second and the third, fourth, and fifth to make sure that they were aligned immediately, and we could save some time as well to in the whole process. And then
I'm sorry, Johan. I just have to ask everyone else. Was the presentation lost just for me, or do the other ones see it?
I can see it.
Okay,
I
good.
can see it.
Then it was just me.
Okay.
Sorry, Johan.
No, it's a good question. Yeah, I'm glad you asked it. For it would be a little bit of a waste if I would have if nobody could see it. So I'm glad everybody can see it. The market engagement. So if we look at that process, our primary focus for market engagement was focused on sustainability, because we already knew because of intensive desk research that would set the market apart and could create some difference between the suppliers we have. And of course, we work in a market which consists of some resellers, because a lot of major vendors, especially the international ones, and then I'll talk about producers like HP or Lenovo or Dell or Apple or whatever. They work with an indirect sales method, of course. So you have resellers, you have distributors, and you have a group of primary major vendors. So we already knew that the sustainability aspects could set them a little bit apart. But what we already always do within our category is that we've already followed market development. So that's an ongoing process, and I use it for the start of the sheet. I use Q1 2020, but we normally focus on that as well. So we have always a lot of talks with different organizations regarding developments. But because we have had so many major tenders just being released in the same period, we started with consulting the market in the Q2 of 2020. And we started in that case, we started off with desk research. So we focused first on getting a lot of information from specific companies, for example, like Gartner or Forrester, to see what was already known within the market regarding sustainability. And our key findings were that those kinds of organizations are specifically focused on IT, but not specifically focused on sustainability. So what they could facilitate us was quite limited, actually, compared to what we wanted to achieve regarding the targets we had. So we start talking as well to different rating organizations like EcoVadis and also TCO Certified about the ambitions they had with their platforms, the things we could use for our tenders, and also the way their certification, of course, works and what would set them apart from the different certifications in the market. So what we also found out in that period is that there are certifications on IT, but they're quite different, even although they're even based on the same ISO standard, for example. They have different system differences and also criteria differences. And we already figured out quite early that we wanted to work with TCO Certified because they had a higher ambition level. You had to conform to all those criteria which were behind it. And they also have independent verifications for all their products. So that made them quite reliable. And we also found that our findings were also confirmed with different researchers from different universities, for example, the University of Leuven, that confirmed our findings. So we already knew that we could use those kinds of certifications in the market, but of course we had to check with the market at that moment. So what we did after that is that we've created a lot of different questions focused on different aspects of sustainability. And you can think about things like what kind of LCAs are most common in the market? What are there market-wide standards? Are they not? On which aspects are there already things in place within our market, or we can borrow from other markets, or do we have to take the lead as a government, for example, on these kinds of topics? And it was quite interesting to see how all those companies responded. So we first had a round which was digital, and we set out those questions and all the suppliers responded. So I think we had like 15 to 20 responding suppliers from all different backgrounds. So we had resellers, we had distributors, we had major vendors, but also companies who focused on renewable products or like refurbished or remanufactured products. So quite a big group. And we found out there were some common aspects in it, but we also saw that there weren't that much market-wide standards. So we picked out the standards we saw, and we still had some questions left. So what we did was we picked out the front runners from the first selection, and we talked to them individually in individual conversations to figure out where optional opportunities were to create more impact and which were the do's and don'ts we absolutely should not do. And we chose to do that in a closed setting with individual talks and publicize anonymously the results afterwards, to make sure the companies could speak freely, of course, without feeling the risk that they would give commercial advantage, of course, to different parties. And after those conversations, we used that to enrich our concept strategy already. We wrote up front, and we didn't state explicitly which aspects we would consider or take in account, but we only publicized our strategy afterwards, so they couldn't relate to anything to a different like vendor or something, to make sure that their commercial interests were benefit. And of course, for us, it's not specifically relevant which company state what, because we always consider our own opinion for that strategy. So we publicized the concept strategy so that all those parties in the whole market could respond to that as well, and finalized, after giving them some time to give some feedback, the procurement strategy in 2021, which gave enough, of course, body to this whole process, so that we already knew the direction we would choose and the solution we would choose. Would give us a lot of flexibility, of course, in the tendering phase, with less risk, of course, also on legal procedures as well, and giving us the room to innovate in a way which was stimulated by the market, but also they would recognize, of course, the things we already wrote down earlier. And afterwards, what we did was build the concept requirements, of course, based on the procurement strategy, but also given on the answers we figured out in the market, and also put that in a set in a way and publicize it publicly so that all the companies could respond again to that. So all the whole market could actually see the whole process we were going through in a year time, from going from completely nothing and giving a direction and stated we're going to publicize a sustainable hardware tender, towards all the way up to seeing all the concept requirements until the last aspect in February, or the last timestamp in February 2021. And we publicized at the end in March 2021. So the requirements we put into place weren't a big surprise to the market. And they had, of course, also maximum influences in all the steps we took in account and all the requirements which were put up, and also like the aspect how much we weighed every award criteria in that. So it led in the end up to a tendering phase, which consisted of 4 tenders and one which was a little bit later. And the beauty of it is that when we publicized those tenders, we didn't have that much questions actually on sustainability. It was just small nuances. And in the end, we didn't have any legal procedure. We didn't have any problem gathering, finalizing those tenders and getting to the contract phase. And the beauty was as well, which was also really interesting, is that the whole market actually conformed maximally to all the higher ambitions we had in these tenders. And they also could, because they knew already upfront which direction we were going, they could already anticipate on it to make sure that their businesses were a little bit ready for this as well. That didn't make it really easy for a lot of companies, of course, to step in these innovative contracts, but it made sure that they commercially were at least ready and could start changing their services already to the level we wanted in a contract phase. And this is the external part, of course, but you also have an internal part. And the internal part means that you have to take along your internal organization, especially within governments, to make them understand which way we were going, but also matching, of course, market developments with internal developments. So we took them step by step through the whole process. Immediately from the beginning, we said sustainability is a starting point, but we're going to help all these organizations with that. And we focused actually every meeting throughout that year as well on sustainability. We started with the Paris Climate Agreement, went down to policies, then went down to product groups, then went to different products, different markets to show them what was possible. So we didn't have any problem taking along our internal organization as well, which made our tenders quite flexible. So that's the whole process of market engagement squeezed into one sheet. And if you translate it into the practical aspect, you have to, of course, make it work. So what we do as a category, we're in the middle of the whole process between, of course, on one side the market, otherwise our contract partners, and otherwise on the other side, of course, our category owners, CPO and customer boards who want to know how the performance is. And if you now look at our contracts, we actually work with what we call like a 3-step rocket. So we have the contractual requirements into place where we focus actually on first some general aspects. So that means we put EcoVadis, for example, into place, and we demanded a minimum score for our EcoVadis score for our resellers. And we set that score on an intermediate level because we knew what was a little bit common in the market, but we want to set up more of a growth model. So we said that's for 4 domain centers, we set that up good. And then we said we want to, within the period of a contract, we want to go to advanced for your company, for our contract partners. For services, we could set up a higher standard because going towards extending, because we already saw that market was a little bit differently organized and already had a higher maturity level based on the EcoVadis score. And that works actually pretty well because EcoVadis is commonly accepted worldwide, and as well as for major vendors are within our country for the resellers. But of course, a reseller doesn't have that much influence on the supply chain, and that's something we saw as well from our market dialogues. So we also, with quite a bit of a trick actually, we connected an EcoVadis requirement to the products we can buy within our contract. So we stated actually that you're only our contract partner is only allowed to deliver products of vendors which have a minimum EcoVadis score of, and I named them a little bit. So for laptops and advanced for clients it's advanced. For displays it was partial because that market was a little bit differently organized. But that one is now already working towards advanced actually. So that's pretty interesting to see that it stimulated the market also into change, because they know if one vendor, for example, is below the threshold of partial or advanced, they're not allowed to deliver to the Dutch government anymore. And if they reach the level of advanced, then they're allowed to deliver. So it's not that we exclude companies, but we set a certain bar for them now in the different contracts. And it works pretty well. But also we want to, and those EcoVadis ratings focus on like 4 different aspects. So sustainable supply chains, sustainability of the company, human rights and ethics, and now I'm missing one, but also on a 4th one. And those 4 subscores are accounted into one overall score. So you have like focusing on the resellers, you focus on the major vendors, on their supply chain, and also we put something into place, of course, to focus on the product. So what we also did as a 3rd step is that we put in a heavy weighing award criteria, like a quarter of all points you can get for based on of all award criteria. And that's something we put into TCO certified. And we said if you comply to delivering only TCO certified products for example, laptops, fat clients and displays, you get like 250 of the 1,000 points you can get for award criteria. So it was like a big incentive for all those resellers to conform to that, because they would lose a competitive advantage if they didn't comply to it. So in the end, all the resellers comply to that. So that's why we only have TCO certified products for laptops and fat clients and displays. For the other product groups, there were not enough products yet to choose that. But in the mini tenders within our framework contracts, you can also put that into place if you see a chance to buy TCO certified products as well. So these 3 steps, make sure you on a major framework contract level, make sure you already have a really huge selection within the companies you can choose from. So we only have the most sustainable company at this moment are allowed to deliver to us. And if you don't meet the threshold, you're not allowed to deliver. So we have a big segmentation already. And we translate these aspects into a dashboard. But what are these aspects we, for example, focus on? Well, if I highlighted a few. We focus, for example, within our products on energy efficiency. It's not the major topic within our products because most of our products are mobile products, so they're already quite energy efficient. We do require Energy Star, but it doesn't say that much, of course, within our contracts. And for the bigger devices like a FAT client, which is focused on performance, we ask 80+ certifications, focus on gold, platinum, and titanium. Also, platinum and titanium were award criteria, so they could choose as well. And we use EU energy labels, for example, for our displays. And we already have minimum requirements put into place for certain display sizes. So we have 24 to 26 inch, for example, is minimum display level like D or C. It's not that high yet, but because we were in the same period that the EU energy labels changed from the A++ way to like A, C, A, B, C, D again. But we also focused on energy management specifics to make sure that a battery is well maintained with a specific state of charge software, and also focuses on state of health so that they last longer to reduce the carbon footprint. From all our products, we can see the LCAs, so we get them delivered also as well, but we see immediately all the CO2 footprints in our reports. Monthly reports, we see them already, but also on a yearly basis. So at the 1st February, we got the whole year. We got the wrap up for the whole year. So I couldn't fit that in this presentation yet, but we do have them available. And it makes sure we have the same, can see the trend of the CO2 footprint going up or going down and the amount of products being bought. And for the LCAs, we focused on specific standards for specific product groups. So the biggest standard we use, for example, for displays or for laptops, is the BIOS standard, which is an intelligent algorithm which creates streamlined LCAs. So they all have the same method, so you can compare them a little bit. But we didn't use it as an award criteria because the market is not ready yet, and LCAs have a bandwidth of about plus or minus 10% as well in their calculations, even if it's the same calculation. So they're not one-on-one comparable, but you can use it really well as a strategic direction. So that's something we learn as well from the market engagement. The CO2 reduction of our contracts is aligned with the Dutch climate agreement and our own policy as the Dutch central government, because the Dutch climate agreement goes to 49-50% in 2030, but the Dutch central government wants to be climate neutral in 2030. So we have a higher ambition as government because, of course, we have a leading role in the whole transition. We focus, of course, on transport, most CO2 efficient mix for international transport. And what we learned in the market dialogue was as well that they said if you forecast better and you standardize or harmonize, which is more used in government-wide languages, because it's less sensitive than standardization. They say if you forecast better, it's easier to transport on a more sustainable way. So you can put it, for example, by train. Well, of course, due to geopolitical developments the last year, that became a little bit harder. And what we did was focusing on like transport within our country. So for smaller vehicles, you can easily use like zero emission vehicles for services or for consultancy services or for smaller repairing or smaller transport batches. You can use easily zero emission. And for the bigger vehicles like freight trucks, there are not that many options yet. So we focus there on CO2 neutral vehicles. And what we also did, we focused on CO2 compensation because there's no such thing as a CO2 neutral IT on its own. And I wouldn't call it now CO2 neutral IT because compensation is a fix and not a solution in my humble perspective. But what you can do with compensation is, of course, compensate based on a uniform standard. But what we did was create award criteria in that way. So we had set the minimum standard on the gold standard, which is quite a high, commonly accepted standard in the market for CO2 compensation. And we borrowed the mechanism from, for example, transport, so international flight and transport. But what we wanted to do is create more impact by choosing standards which focus not only on environment, but also on the human aspect in these cases. And that made sure that that's why we chose for the highest award criteria, we use the Fair Trade Climate Standard, and all parties confirmed to that. And that means that we focus also on fair wages, better living circumstances, more health for the in those kinds of countries. Also focusing on local economies, creating businesses and jobs in those kinds of countries with using these standards next a high standard compared to what's regular in the market. So also to contribute maximum to the sustainable development goals which we identified up front for our tender. If I focus on sustainability economy, and I'm checking the time a little bit, I'm still within my schedule, I think. We focus also on things we learned from availability of spare parts, the amount of years if we want to maximize lifespans, and reducing CO2 emissions, for example, and reducing the use of virgin materials to make sure that products last as long as possible. So we focused on availability of spare parts, of course, and repairability as well. Like France has now a really nice repairability index. We try to update that in our contracts as well to make them all already aligned with, of course, new developments coming up. You always can deliver refurbished or remanufactured products within our contracts. They can always buy it. It's not very common within the government because they focus on, of course, but mostly focus on new products still. Doesn't say it doesn't change, but we made it facilitated at least so to make sure that those products can be bought at least. But one of the most important things is as well as the software component, of course, within hardware. And we demand minimum support for security updates for 4 years, and we're probably going to update it to 5. And of course, we had some questions from the market because they said, well, you're going to exclude a lot of companies which, for example, can deliver smartphones. But we stated actually, and we took the lead in this one, we said we consider that a commercial a business model because we think you can easily give 4 years of support, of course, on your products, but you choose not to. And in that light, you're not the type of supplier we want as a Dutch government. So what we did, we put it on 4 years. So we excluded quite a lot of brands, but of course they can change their business model and go to 4 year support and then start delivering again towards the Dutch government. And what we now already see is that there are already vendors working towards 4 years of support. 5 year gets already more common. So you already see a little bit of change, of course, in the market that way. So this was something the market didn't agree on, but we choose a direction, we choose to lead on that aspect. We also put EU's compensation into place, which is a compensation method based on the amount of e-waste one device creates. And there are now 2 companies worldwide which facilitate under that TCO certified edge e-waste compensated method. And it means that we try to do something about the worldwide e-waste problem. It's not that we see it as compensating the raw materials of one device, because I don't think that aligns one-on-one, but it does something about the e-waste problem, also creates CO2 reduction, but also creates local jobs as well. And we monitor it by a fair change solution. Well, I'm going to skip due to the time. I'm going to skip the lease part, but that's also something we put into place, and which where we demand that a lot of minimum of 80% of the products will be repurposed for second or third life. And that was also an award criteria. The baseline was 60%, but every supplier confirmed to the award criteria to make it 80%. I'm going to highlight the dashboard really quick due to time. So what I already said, we get a lot of data, of course, from our contracts. And what you now see in general are the footprints from all our devices within our contracts from 2018 to 2022. So we have the footprints automatically being delivered from medium of from August 2021. So what we did was we already had the data of a lot of products, but we didn't have all the footprints. So we had to do a lot of reverse engineering manually. So we had to analyze like 60, 70,000 rows of data to see what kind of products have been delivered, what are the footprints to create this overview. And we took 2019 as a baseline because 2019 is the year of the Dutch Climate Agreement, and as well as Procurement with Impact, a government-wide strategy. And we already knew that the whole economy was on 90% of 1990 level. So we took that as a baseline. So the green pillar is the targets of the climate agreement of the Dutch government. The orange one are the gross CO2 footprint of all the products, and blue is the net CO2 footprint. So you see a really nice degradation slowly from 2019 to 2022, with the exception of 2020, which was the pandemic. So we figured out what causes, of course, to grow in CO2, and it had to do with the procurement of a lot of mobile devices for all people working at home. So you see like a grow in 2020, then a descending trend again for 2021. And you can also see the purple one is for CO2 compensation. So you see compensation gradually going up. So you see the blue one disappearing. I don't consider it CO2 neutral, but in a graphical way, it works a little bit like this. And we have a stronger descending trend, of course, towards 2022 to 2024 or 2025 because of the new coalition agreement. And for our business is, of course, we want to have it CO2 neutral. And we do count it in that way at this moment, but it can change due to the future. So in 2021, we could already see that we were at 70% compared to 1990. And we hope to see a descending trend again this year. But I unfortunately do not have the data ready yet to put it in. Otherwise, I would gladly have shown, and I'm curious as well for myself to which direction we are heading. So what we do as well is like a dashboard we have on all topics. So we can see how is the climate KPI performance going. We see in that one is at 0% at 2021, because we already saw for this specific contract that we bought more laptops than the year before. But if you put it into the light of all our contracts, which you saw on the page earlier, we have a descending trend. But for these specific products, it is ascending. So that's really something we monitor as well, and we hope to see a descending trend as well this year. But we also see like the average scores we have on sustainability on the EcoVadis level, also on circularity. We have some data. And we also see the corporate social responsibility aspects, focusing on our policy, but also on like labor, human rights, and ethics for resellers and for suppliers. So we make a difference between that as well. And also on social return, which is different aspects, which is less relevant for these kinds of contracts, at least for laptops and clients. But what we also do is generate average product carbon footprints for which we use for our stakeholders as well within the government to show them, of course, if you select these kinds of products, this is the effect on the CO2 footprint. So you can see the bigger the product, the higher the CO2 footprint, and also the composition of the product has effect on how much or how high the CO2 footprint is based on the 4-year life cycle. I use 4 years. I think we can push it more, but this is more common in the market, so it's more comparable and it gives a more reliable insight. But it doesn't say products only can last 4 years. Of course, it can last up to 7 years in some cases. So that's something we do as well. So of course, we're a purchasing category, so we aren't responsible directly for the type of products we buy as a Dutch government, but we do have the data, of course, to advise and give recommendations to our stakeholders for changing their product portfolio and going for different concepts. And one of the major ones is, of course, deduplication, which we facilitate, and that means buy less, but use like your work laptop, for example, privately or vice versa. It's the easiest way to reduce CO2 and reduce the use of virgin materials, but it also gives them more flexibility, of course, in daily life. And it's also a nice cost-saving matter because you can do something with you need less products, so you don't have to buy them for your own, or the company doesn't have to buy them. We suggest corporately owned, personally enabled more, because in that way you do have influence in the type of products your employees use, for example. And of course, we say something about life cycles. So we think smartphones and tablets could easily last up to 5 to 6 years at this moment, maybe even more. Laptops, we suggest 5 to 7 years of usage. And displays, we actually say 10 years, but only change them by defect, because those things can stand actually maybe even for 30 years without some LEDs going defect. And we give some suggestions about extending life cycles, what the effect of CO2 reduction is, and also the example of how you can change your portfolio due to the type of products you give to your employees to make sure that that the CO2 footprint of your product portfolio goes down. So in a short summary, that's my presentation and the effects we get from the market development and the market engagement. So I now have to stop my presentation.
So dear Johan, thank you very much for this very comprehensive presentation.